Okay, hello there. This is just a video summation of the work that I have done for the digital imaging part of this course. What the task is that I've been asked to do is I've been asked to create a future depiction of how the city of Edinburgh will look in the year 2050. The approach that I've taken towards that is I've gone with a sort of dystopian sort of future kind of thing. Like how will the world look after Brexit happens? What's that going to do to our economy? Therefore, how are we going to perceive our physical world with regards to our digital world, with regards to like digital security and stuff? For instance, one of the sources from which I've taken inspiration was the way in which Vladimir Putin came to power. When he was coming to power, he was working for the KGB, and while he was working in the Stasi headquarters, basically he was left in charge at one point, and and at the time when he was in charge, the headquarters like an angry mob started to form outside of the actual headquarters, and so basically what he did was he had to keep on calling the physical headquarters of the KGB in Moscow, and they kept on not picking up, and this crowd kept on forming, becoming even more angry. This was when the Berlin Wall was going to come down. This crowd was protesting over the destruction of the Berlin Wall, and as I say, no response. Keeps on getting no response for ages and ages and ages, and then eventually he gets a response when he calls them, and the only thing that is said is Moscow is silent. The reason why I find that quote so interesting and as such inspiration towards this project, I think, is because how will we perceive this with regards to technology? What will the world be like when the internet is silent? Will the political climate that is occurring at the moment, will this create this sort of undesired effect, so to say, within the internet? When will the internet announce that it is dead? Therefore, what I've decided to do for this is I've decided to to make like a sort of video collage of this character walking up to the edge of a view that I'm making to look as if it's Arthur's Seat, and then looking out over the city of Edinburgh as if it were displayed on a CCTV camera. The hill on which he's standing upon, that is reality, because that's nature and that's what's left of Edinburgh, yet he's just looking back over a digital recreation of the city of Edinburgh over a massive CCTV monitor. Therefore, the steps that I've taken towards creating that is, to start off with, I first started off via going to this location here that's shown on screen. I'm not entirely sure how well this is showing up, and what I did was I went over to this spot here, and at the time, like, I had like a camera with me and a tripod and stuff, and I effectively just constantly took photos for about an hour and a half. I think in total I took about 1,000 photos, and the idea was to kind of create a time lapse. Like sometimes I was taking photos here, and then there was a little kind of point just down here. I'm not entirely sure if that's visible on here. Actually, I'll just zoom out, see if I can get it to show up. Nope, can't get it to show up. So yeah, once I'd done that, the next thing that I intended to do was just to import all of my photos into Adobe Premiere Pro, and then just assemble the time lapse into an actual video within there. However, I kept on getting this weird error but because I had captured the images in .cr2 format. What .cr2 format is it's basically just the Canon RAW file format. So when I had when I had configured the settings on my camera, it was set up to take them in RAW format. However, Canon have their own version of the RAW format, and so Premiere didn't like that. So what I had to do was I had to download an external piece of software to Premiere Pro itself, and then try to use that so as to batch convert the images. However, once I tried to do that, I got this very strange error. Which I will show you in just a minute. Anyways, yeah, what happened was, so this is the time-lapse output here. What happened was when I took the photos in the first place, they kind of had this sort of pinkish hue to them. What I think had happened was, because this was just a free third-party piece of software, when I tried to convert the photos, because there were so many photos, I think what it had perhaps done is, in some ways, it had somehow, when it was physically transferring the actual binary data of the images from the one format that it was in at the time to, I think it was PNG format that I was converting them to. I think because it would have to physically take all of the RGB values of the CR2 image and then convert those values into RGB values which are compatible with a PNG image, it wasn't transferring certain color channels, hence this sort of pinkish hue. So what I did was, at this point, I basically decided to write my own software so as to convert the images. This is it here. So what this program here is doing is it's effectively doing the equivalent of this command here. However, what the joy of this script that I've been writing is that it would take whatever it finds within a directory or a subdirectory or whatever, and then it would basically pipe that output through to a text file, and then that would use a processing sketch so as to then reference all of those file locations of the images, take them into the program that I was writing in processing, and then get that to resave the images as PNGs. So this is it running. So what it's doing at the moment is it's checking through the installed hard disks that you have in your machine. So obviously in my case it's found 7, and then it's checking this file location here for where the photos might be. And now what it's going to do is, as you can see, it's saying, for instance, take these first 2 lines. There's a bit in red, and what it means is when the program is in seek mode, it means it's looking for the file itself, and then the line below that, so this one here, where it has in green log mode, what that's doing is it's found the file location and therefore the file name of one of the individual files, and then it's writing that that file's location out to a text file in, bear with me a moment, change the font a bit. So anyways, yes, this file here, the ref log, as I've called it, what this is meant to do is this is effectively just meant to keep a reference of the mode in which the program was running at the time of which a file was logged. So for example, at 10 minutes past 5 AM on the 4th of, I don't know, February or something, it would be running in seek mode, and then 2 seconds later it would change to log mode. However, it appears not to have done that. And then another problem that occurred was it would only take the first file location, and it would only log that. Sometimes if you tried to run it for a while, it would just keep on outputting the same file location to the text file, and the way in which I thought would be best so as to fix that problem would be to rewrite the entire program. And obviously, because I was on a deadline, that wasn't going to be a valid solution. So I'll just let this finish. So obviously up here you've also got the elapsed runtime duration in milliseconds. And then what that should do is just at the end it should show the exact time at which it started, at which the program started running, i.e. when it started looking for the file locations, and then the time at which it stopped looking for file locations. And then obviously here you have, well, I think this is this is what writes the start and stop times of the actual end and start times to a text file of some sort. So it's obviously this line here. This will be physically responsible for providing how long it's been writing for. So as I say, that didn't really work. And the next thing that I had to do after that was I had to anyways, yes, what I did after that was because at the time I wasn't entirely sure if I could get the time-lapse working and things. What I had to do so as to amend this problem was I basically created a 3D replica of Arthur's seat in Blender, and then I imported this over to Adobe Photoshop so as to texture the model and things within there. This kind of bit here, this weird sort of bulbous bit kind of down here, this was the physical location from which the image itself was going to be captured, so to say. Yeah, so what I did was I took this model into Photoshop after kind of creating this sort of false perspective, and then what I did was I chopped and changed certain bits of it until it kind of resembled this sort of shape here. One thing to note is that it didn't always have this this same texture to it. What I did was I created like just a weird sort of little collage kind of effect, and then I applied that over the model itself. As I say, I couldn't figure out how to texture the model within Blender because I would have had to have UV unwrap the texture map itself, and I'm not entirely sure how to do that. So anyways, what I did was after I had created this this texture map, it was quite a colourful and sort of bright and overly vibrant kind of thing. What I did was so to create a more sort of mountainous effect, if you will. I applied a threshold filter to the texture itself, and then this obviously created this sort of snowy sort of vibe to it. And then, like so as to add a bit more kind of more of a kind of coarse nature to it, I basically added in this this grain effect. I'm not entirely sure how well this will show up, but yeah, I've used the one of the built-in functions of Photoshop so as to apply that. Yeah. Then after that, so as to create this this character that I've been talking about, what I did was I had to I filmed myself like wearing like a massive jacket and everything, like walking over a pile of cushions and stuff, like in my living room against a solid coloured wall, which would effectively work as a green screen. I have the footage in here somewhere. Yeah, for instance, this is one of my reference images. The design for the character, which is what this was meant to be. This was initially meant to be reference footage so as to create a rotoscope of this character, and then have the character imported into the final thing, like as an animation. This is basic. The idea behind the character is that the character is it's almost like a kind of continuation of a piece that I did back when I was in college, which had this this other little figure that I'd drawn. Walking towards the edge of the old world, as I had called it, and then they get eaten by this giant mouth, and it's meant to represent a paradigm shift. So anyways, yes, this footage here, this shot in particular, this was meant to be for what I thought would be quite an interesting idea, is the character is walking through like a sort of snowstorm, and they have a little radio hanging off of their shoulder, and then they're adjusting this radio and tuning in the sounds of the new world, which originally my idea was for that to be like a cue for the background music to come in. However, obviously that changed a little bit. So the first task that I had to go about doing with regards to this was chopping out the background. So that was a pretty simple task in its own right. This just consisted of chroma keying the footage itself within Premiere Pro, and then I'm not entirely sure if this is the first clip. However, I'll double check. But yeah, this yielded this sort of result. And what I did was, obviously, this kind of greenish white area down here. This was parts of the image that I didn't want, so I had to re-import this into Premiere and then create like an opacity mask so as to remove these kinds of areas, and then had his image tracking and stuff. So as to get the mask to physically stay aligned to the character, so as to remove the background. I think one of the examples I have of that is this one here. This shot here is the main shot that was used in the final thing. However, some of these bluish areas, they were chopped out a little bit. I think because I'm not entirely sure why actually. I think that they just didn't really work with regards to the kind of feel that I was trying to create with the footage. So yeah, after that, I then had to start drawing up the face for this character, and because as you can see in this shot here, well, obviously this is like the what I did was I illustrated the character's face, and then the idea was that I was going to filter the footage of me against the green screen, so to say, so that it looked as if it was illustrated. However, because of time constraints and things, I only really had the time to illustrate the face. However, this is one of the sort of end implementations of the face into the final thing. So what I've done here is I've removed my face from a facial close-up of me, and then I've just replaced that face with this. One thing I would have liked to have done is I would have liked to have added in a blink animation, because I think that the face that I got at the moment, it looks kind of too glazed over, so to say. But then again, in some ways that kind of works, because the idea is that because this is meant to be a continuation of a piece about a paradigm shift, then I guess that the character that I had in that, they kind of look quite glazed over and knackered and destroyed in that. So in some ways I think that the lack of the blinking motion kind of works. However, I'm not entirely sure. So anyways, yes, the way in which I went about drawing this face was I did the initial sketches of it and stuff, just within Adobe Illustrator, and then I imported all of this over to Photoshop. If you just give me a minute so as to find the file. So anyways, yes, the face itself, after adding what I added and stuff within Illustrator, I then took the illustration itself, so just the I think it was just the line data itself, so just the vector illustration, and I put that into Photoshop, and what I did was I found like loads of different textural photos and stuff, so like sort of photos of like skin diseases and things, and all of that kind of juicy stuff, and what I did was I also found like a couple of random just like illustrations and things like on Pinterest, and I kind of pieced them together and stuff, like kind of behind the illustration, so as to create tonight a sort of skin with skin damage, but then that's been tattooed over the top. I think that this kind of area around here, this started off as one of the sort of Chinese, Japanese traditional tattoos, like of like a huge ass dragon or something. And then one detail in particular that stands out to me with this is the mouth. What I did with that was I found like this image of like this 80-year-old guy's mouth, and then I changed the color attributes very slightly. So I changed the color curves of the mouth and things, so that it was the same kind of texture as the rest of the face. And then what I did was, once I'd done that, I found, I put a black background on it, and then I put the visuals themselves into this site here. What was it called again? Yes, into this site here called Photomosh. And what Photomosh does is that, well, the clue's pretty much in the name. You can use it so as to, I thought you could use a webcam here. Let me just find an image quickly. So what you can do is you can effectively just well, what the site itself does is it creates just random sort of distortion effects and things, as you can see here. So what I did was I took this image of this guy's face, and I applied this filter here called scan lines. And the idea behind that was that there was that when, well, at certain points you would hear like kind of white noise and stuff coming from this radio, and then the scan lines, I think there's a way in which you can make them move sort of as if they're kind of moving down the image itself, the scan lines. What I was going to do was I was going to make it look as if the scan lines were moving down the way when this white noise came into play. However, obviously the bit rate of the video itself, that didn't really allow for that to happen in the final shot. I don't think it was quite picked up. So anyways, yeah, what I did once I had finished that was I put this render of this into Adobe Premiere Pro, and I basically just went about removing the black background from this, so that it was just opaque around the face. And then, like I say, I just put this. I chopped my own face out of the which close up is it? Out of this camera shot here of my face. So what I did so as to obviously in the final version of this shot, like my skin and things, it looked quite grey and desaturated and stuff. Anyways, what I had done with that was I had used a chroma key effect, and then I applied VR digital glitch effects over the top of that. So it effectively looked as if the figure was a kind of faulty visualization generated by a computer or something that had no pigment and was like dying of cancer, but because of the light. Yeah. I think that one of the before I had done that, one of my ideas, like with the raw footage and things, was to piece everything together, to chop the background out of all of the raw footage, and then assemble all of that, and then put the face in. However, that didn't really go to plan, because I think that as I was editing and stuff, I kind of felt that I had to see stuff just as it looked. Well, I had to complete things to a certain extent. I felt, not only because I had time constraints and things, but also because I needed to see how things were going to look, because in the end that shot with a cliff, that was going to have to go behind, so I was going to have to figure out how much my body could physically be filling the shot in order for enough of the background to still be doing the thing justice. So yeah, this was one of the versions of the facial close-up that I was showing just a second ago. However, this didn't quite render properly. Yeah, this I think was meant to render at 200 frames per. The final render was meant to run at 200 frames per second. However, for some strange reason, when I tried to render this in Adobe After Effects, After Effects just decided it hated me and crashed, and so I only got like a 4-frame piece of footage. So after all of that, what I did was what did I do? So yeah, one of the other things that I also did was I obviously had to work on the background music. So the music that I chose to use for that was the track North North, as it's called, by Vince Staples, who was basically he, as far as I can remember, I think he was a support act during the Humans tour for Gorillaz. And what I did was I edited a piece of his music, and I just sort of applied like delays and things to that, so this kind of static radio effect that was going on. The idea was that when the character switched on this radio, it would merge into this track here. I think this is the correct sample of audio. There was a second one as well. No. Yes, here it is. So anyways, the idea behind this was, over time I've just kind of collated various audio clips and stuff, and I just pieced them all to, like, I just found a couple that were just lying around on my hard drive, and then I just kind of pieced them all together so as to create like weird kind of background noise going on with this. So as to kind of add a bit more kind of oomph to the bass line of the track. What I did was I took this clip here, this one here, of basically an industrial grade power hammer, so as to create this kind of effect like every couple of milliseconds or so. And I think what was also quite useful about that was it sort of acted as a kind of metronome. However, in the end, this didn't really get used because I created a second piece, which I don't know where it is. One moment. So yes, I created this piece instead, and this was meant to be the intro for the track. However, like I feel that this one, it sort of it kind of started off a bit more kind of quietly in things, and then it builds its way up to becoming quite dramatic and blown out of proportion and things. So what I did was I used a Roland System 1 synthesizer, so as to create a kind of background piece for this. And then what I did was put that into a DAW, a digital audio workstation called Reaper, which I then applied various other sound effects that I had recorded. So like this very light sort of drum beat, just with just like a normal sort of drum, and I think there's a couple of other bits that are done with bongos and things. However, other than that, the rest of it's done using synthesizer. There is one clip of audio in there of just the sound of me breathing and things. However, what I've done with that is that's been put through an echo generator, and so it comes across as being far more high pitched and sort of pingy sort of noise and kind of nasally than you would expect. But I mean, here's a sample. I guess that would probably explain it a bit better than I can. So the inspiration behind this bit was it was this film that I watched a little while ago called Beasts of No Nation, and in that film, what happened was it was set in the Democratic Republic of Congo during the I think it was the 90s or something. And basically, it was about this little boy who joins basically this kind of militia, and when he joins this militia, there's this basically a city, the village in which he is living is destroyed by like the military or something of the neighbouring country, of whom there are a lot of immigrants coming from, I think. And what happens is, when he joins this militia, basically, because it's basically a guerrilla warfare, so there's obviously a lot of children and things in this militia. There's this scene where like all of these young boys and stuff, that they're made to become men, close quotes. And what that consists of is basically this kind of visualization of this ritual of people running through like crowds of other people, like beating them with their sticks and things. I think it's quite like a common sort of thing in like more sort of underdeveloped parts of Africa and stuff, for this to be a thing. So obviously they were going through this ceremony of being made to become men and things, and the audio in that, there was like weird sort of kind of moanish sort of chanting going on in the background. And I think that because of the kind of abstractionism of the chanting and stuff, and this sort of humming noise that like these kind of tribal elder people were making, I think that this inspired the drum kind of bit that I had done. So yeah, I think around the 2-minute mark or so, I think that's when the synthesizer stuff starts to kick in. I'll just try and find that bit, and then you can listen back to that. No. Yeah, so just about here you can kind of hear this this one sort of pinging noise every now and then, and that's the bass line kicking in. So what I did so as to record that bit itself, what I did was I basically just I literally only played one note, and then there's this function on the Roland System 1 called key hold, and what that does is it takes the key that you're currently playing, it quantizes that note, and then just loops it over and over and over. When you use the key hold button, it's basically just outputting what's in its memory at that time, and it's just going through a loop of that. And there's also this thing called a scatter control. I'll just find an image actually of the synth itself, that might make a bit more sense. First, explain this. So as you can see, basically down here, you have this thing here. This is called a scatter control, and what that does is, if you're not using the key hold function, this is effectively this will work as a pitch controller. So, for example, if I was to turn this to the left, and I had this button here pressed, which creates a high pitch tone, that would create a sort of lower ranged high pitch tone within the frequency of what could be regarded as high pitched tones. Then if I use the the same with the down button next to it. Whereas when you use the key hold button, and then you adjust, and then you turn this little wheel here, the scatter controller, basically what that will do then is it will well, it will quite literally do that. It will scatter the notes, so it'll kind of change the pattern that's occurring within what you've created, so to say. So for example, you might have like 3 notes, and then on every second note, it makes it seem as if there's 2 more notes than there actually is. So yeah. Alongside that, there are also quite a couple of little subtle effects that I was like adding in just in real time as I was recording. There's such as reverb control and stuff, and also the crusher effect. What that does is that kind of applies a bit more distortion and stuff to the sound. So that's almost like a distortion pedal in many ways. So you kind of get like this sort of blockish texture to the sound, and that's also quite interesting. Alongside these things here, the oscillator octave controllers. So for example, if it's set to 2-bit mode, then well, it'll sound like quite sort of retro and things. Whereas if it's set to 64-bit mode, I think it is. Then it'll well, the sound will be a bit more sort of detailed and have a bit more clarity to it and stuff. The other reason why I think this worked is because this is a mono synthesizer. That basically means that only one note can be played at a time. So you can't effectively have like you can't create a metronome and then have an overlay playing at the same time on this thing. So you kind of have no choice but to make a sort of minimalist sort of sound and then edit that outside of the recording software. So I think that was quite nice. So yeah, going back to the time lapse, after I had failed with putting it through this piece of software, what I had to do was I used one of the Macs that there are at the university, and what I found within there is within just the default image viewer, there's a thing that you can use so as to just batch convert images in there to PNG files. So I did that, and then my idea was that when I had got everything into Premiere as PNG files, I would just well, there was a video of some clouds that I got when I was walking the dog on this beach a couple of months ago. Like the light, it was like basically sort of orange, like this sort of religious kind of glow, like almost golden looking, that was occurring. And what I thought would be quite interesting is if like I kind of took like the sort of upper quadrant per se of this footage, and I made this an overlay over the top of the time lapse, so as to like kind of add to the light a bit, because there wasn't all that much going on in the time lapse, and yet there was a bit going on with the clouds. However, it didn't vary all that much. So So yeah, obviously I had to think of ways in which I could account for this lack of detail. And one of the things that I did was once the time lapse was exported and things, I took the footage and well, I think that you can probably see it in. So yeah, what I did here was so as to remove the background, like I just chroma keyed out the sky itself, and then I was obviously just left with this, and I applied again. I applied this sort of glitch effect to it, and yeah. Yeah, I applied the glitch effect, and what I also did was I applied this footage that I filmed just like out of the windscreen, like of a car. I think my dad was giving me a lift back from Glasgow or something a while ago, and the sky in that was pretty interesting. Like there was quite it was quite overcast then, like coming back from there. So I think that my idea was that I was going to use that, and the clouds would just well, they just blend in quite subtly. However, quite the opposite to this happened, as you can see here. If you just wait a minute. Anyways, what was meant to happen with this is that that there was meant to be, but because we were driving along like a motorway and there was quite a lot of bridges and stuff that we drove under, there was this sort of blackish kind of line that would sort of sweep over the image, and then that would kind of create. I suppose that you could say it almost looked a bit like a kind of, well, a bit like this sort of scan line, this TV kind of scan line effect that was going on a bit. So I think that was quite interesting. As far as the yeah, so once I had finished the cliff and everything, once that was all textured and stuff, the next thing that I did was well, that had to be implemented into all of the these shots here and stuff. So so as to create like a background and stuff. One of the more challenging shots to create was this one here. As you can see in this shot, well, I'm not entirely sure if you can see actually, but the background, it's very slightly tilted, and what I did was I had to put this into Adobe After Effects and apply I think it was a perspective warp or something. I'm not entirely sure what the appropriate name is for it in After Effects. However, I had to do that, and then do the same thing to the overlay of me, which I put over the top in Premiere. So yeah, I think that yeah, the reason why that was awkward to do is because the original version of this shot, when I tried to just create this in Premiere for the first time, there was so much going on in the composition that I had created that it wasn't physically able to pre-render it because there was so much other footage, and so it basically just wouldn't show up. So as I say, I had to do this this bit alongside various other sections of footage, just in segments and stuff, so as to put in the background and things. But other than, yeah. one thing I should also mention is that with this shot here, there's an effect called VR fractal noise in the background, just very slightly covering the character's face. What this is it's basically just it's just like a kind of weird sort of version of Perlin noise. However, I think that Adobe just are weird and just use different terminology for it. So I kind of added this in so as to create a sort of mistish effect over the character itself, just so as to kind of add a bit of a kind of fog to the scene, just so as to add a bit more atmosphere and things, you know. So I mean that you get that in places, but like not in all of the camera profiles. So I mean I think that kind of adds to it slightly. Yeah, one of the final things I did was to add in this face here. What the reason for that is that the face is dreaming of the harshness of reality, so to say. So for instance. Yeah, so for instance, this graphic here, this is literally just an illustration that I drew the other day, and I changed the hue of and stuff just within Photoshop. This is meant to be like a Trump supporter. So this figure, the reason why I drew them is because they're meant to be like a representation of the political atmosphere that we're almost subconsciously creating, or at least that the media is trying to make us believe that we are forcing ourselves into. Yeah, so that's why like you kind of get these random sorts of panning shots and stuff. Other than that, the last thing that I did with regards to the audio was I applied this thing called an analog delay, which I feel just basically it kind of creates a more sort of, I don't quite know how to describe it actually, but it creates a sort of more kind of raw effect to the audio itself. To the background music. So for instance, when I recorded the stuff on the synthesizer, it very clearly sounded like a analog sort of sound. However, once I had edited that and stuff, it kind of lost that quality a bit. So I was trying to figure out how to bring that back a little. Within the final editing, and this analog delay did that. One of the other things that I did also, so as to kind of change the way in which the sound is positioned and stuff, was I tried remapping the audio and stuff. What that effectively means is that, for instance, because I was the audio itself was in 5.1 stereo, 5.1 surround sound. That effectively meant that there was two sets of left inputs and two sets of right inputs. So, for example, I changed it so that at points it would be the left is mapped to right, or right is mapped to left, or whatever, and that just kind of added quite an interesting vibe to the, particularly so to the drum sections and stuff. It kind of gave you the impression that they were positioned in certain places and things. So yeah. Other than that, before I rendered out the final thing, I changed the aspect ratio and and stuff. One of the reasons why the light and stuff differs in this here with regards to the final thing is because I changed the contrast and also the kind of this sort of this kind of orangish blob, these kind of orange blobs in the background. What I did was I took like this photo of me like moving the camera really fast over like this Vogue magazine, and as I say, because I chroma keyed out the background, that allowed for me to then put in this photo. The idea was going to be that I would add in like sort of billboards and stuff. However, I figured it might be kind of interesting to just have like one massive sort of ad as the skyline, so it's almost as if like one sole corporation just dominates over everything. Therefore, that is the skyline and stuff. And also the fact that the time lapse is meant to represent a CCTV camera. Note the way in which the angle of the footage changes so much. It's almost like different cameras and things switching inputs and stuff. It kind of makes more sense because like you would have like an overlay and stuff. So I guess that it's quite interesting in some ways to have like an underlay going on. You wouldn't really get that with the CCTV camera, so I guess it kind of applies a sort of a bit more of a sort of abstract kind of effect to it and things. Other than that, I think I'm just rambling now, and that's all I have to say.